Hi, I'm Colleen Nelson, licensed therapist, trauma expert, and fellow badass woman ready to rise up right alongside you. This podcast, Let the Rest Burn, is for the woman who has ignored, attacked, or even silenced her inner voice because she thought it was broken and needed to be fixed. It's for the woman who is ready to rise up and fully step into her desire, her joy, her full power, and make the impact she was destined to make. For the woman who cannot stand one more second waiting, watching, and witnessing the world crumble, and is ready to rebuild and expand into a better future. For a woman who is so done trying to fix the world, she decided to start with healing herself, and she let the rest burn. Hey there. Welcome to my first episode of Let the Rest Burn. On this episode, I want to talk a little bit about why I chose these words and why I feel inspired to talk about how women are taught to play small, to stay within the box, and how we can tap into our power and our flow as women and truly make the impact that we want to make on the world. So let's start with the inspiration behind the quote. It's a Glennon Melton Doyle quote from Untamed. This quote inspired me from the moment that I read it. I continue to go back to that moment that I listened to her book, and then I bought the book and read it. And I couldn't believe how each sentence kind of felt like it was calling specifically to me. And this is why, for me, every single time I think about this quote, it brings me back to the purpose I have as a therapist, as a woman, as a mom, as a person in the world. And I find that the women I work with as clients sometimes need to be brought back to this very space. So I'm going to read the quote to you now. This is from Untamed, and this inspired my podcast, Let the Rest Burn. When women lose themselves, the world loses its way. We do not need more selfless women. What we need right now is more women who have detoxed themselves so completely from the world's expectations that they are full of nothing but themselves. What we need are women who are full of themselves. A woman who is full of herself knows and trusts herself enough to say and do what must be done. She lets the rest burn. Okay, so this quote, I would say the first thing that I heard when I listened to the quote was full of herself. And I was like, ugh, I had a visceral reaction in my body. Like, I don't want to be full of myself. And immediately I knew this is it. This is the exact reason that she wrote this, because we are sitting here thinking, I want to be full of everything but myself. We fill our head, our hearts, our bodies with everything that isn't us. And then we wonder why it's hard to find our voice. It's hard to be the person that we want to be. It's hard to determine what actually fulfills us in life. And this is where I find the most fascinating work as a therapist. How do we reprogram ourselves? How do we actually clear the path so we can leave room for ourselves to actually be inside our body, inside our minds, inside our hearts? Well, I'll tell you this, it's not easy. In order to clear out those old stories, sometimes it takes that deeper trauma work. As an EMDR professional, I do this therapeutic work all the time. I actually utilize this technique to clear out our nervous systems of everything that we've been told we should or shouldn't do. So sometimes it takes deep core somatic therapeutic work. But I'd say it all starts with just recognizing that we actually deserve to take up space. EMDR continues to be one of the techniques that I use to help women clear out their nervous system and make space for what their experiences in life, their presence in the world actually calls them to do. But I also think it takes community. It takes us calling each other out, creating space for these conversations, coming together and actually taking a first step in front of other women, leading the way, taking that step first. Because to take up space, sometimes we need to create it. So that's part of what I'm doing with this podcast. I am taking up space in the world. I am creating a space for all of you to take up space in the world, carving out time in your day to listen to this, to tap into this, to give yourself space to feel this in your body, that's where we start. We have to start with creating space. I want you to ask yourself this question. How many times in a day do you move your wants, your wishes, your needs out of the way for someone else's? For me, it's hundreds. And before I realized how often I did this, I would end my day exhausted, depleted, overwhelmed, and sometimes resentful. In particular, watching my ex-husband just be able to say no, be able to create space for himself. I mean, I know those of you that have ever been in a relationship with a man can know they create space for the bathroom literally anytime they want. And I'm not kidding. Like, I could be in the middle of changing 18 diapers and like a fire is going off and he's going to go poop. I mean, it is ridiculous. I can't even with men sometimes. But it's because they have been taught that holding space for themselves, meeting their own needs is okay. Now, we're not going to get into how meeting their emotional needs is not okay. That's a conversation for another day. But the contrast is sometimes blaringly obvious. And I see it a lot in my heteronormative couples where they're coming in and they're having a conversation about, I don't understand why she doesn't just tell me what she needs. Or I don't understand why he just takes whatever he wants or does what he needs to do. And I bring up the bathroom example because I'm pretty sure it's the example I get in every single couple session I've ever had in my life. Not to mention my own personal experience. So I want you to really think about this. I want you to think about how often do you even ask yourself what your needs are? And is this something we want to role model for the next generation? And that's the tricky part. You've probably gotten quite comfortable with putting your needs aside for others. In fact, it's celebrated. You are this, helpful, kind, relational being in the world. And I'm not saying that we can't do this sometimes, but it's not at the cost of our own. We can create space for people and ourselves. But in order to do both, we have to start with us. We do not want to role model this for our daughters, for our sons. We don't want to role model this for any of our children. Because if we do, they are not in a position where they get to take up space in a way that is actually aligned to who they are. Taking up space is one of the things that I think will ignite the healing of this world. Because if each and every single one of us is able to tap into what we're truly meant here to do, our presence, our meaning, our purpose, we're not going to be competitive in the same way. We're not going to be resentful in the same way. We aren't going to be taking over your space because I don't feel like I have enough for me. It kind of switches us out of this scarcity versus abundance mode where we get to finally step in. There's enough space for everybody. And so, this podcast came out of a call for me to take up space, a call for me to step fully into my power and to speak into these vulnerable topics that I have with clients that I want you to hear as a therapist, but as a woman. I want you to know you're not alone. And that this movement, this call to action that we are all feeling within our bones, it's coming up. It's here. It's arrived. So I'm going to leave you with this thought. As you listen to this podcast, as you hear me interview women who are doing this thing, who are stepping fully into themselves and burning the rest down, I want you to ask yourself, what is the one tiny step you can take today to just be a little more full of yourself? What is the step you can take to just edge into the world and make that impact that I know we all need? I am so excited to be here with you all, and I cannot wait for the conversations we're going to have. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate every single second that you chose to set aside for you and the impact that you're going to have on the world today. To be inspired, to be seen, and to hold space starts with the very actions we take with ourselves. Look at the show notes for more information. like and subscribe, and share with friends if you feel inspired to. And as always, let the rest burn.